Bob was in a bad mood. In fact, he had been for a few weeks now. He was one of the higher-ish members of an unsanctioned religious group. In other words, a cult. Honestly, the man didn't believe in anything the organization was spouting. He was just glad his services were required. After all, he was the feared devil butcher, a serial game ender, an enjoyer of long pig. The cult really being the only people to somewhat tame his appetite, at least for now. Bob, together with his master, was currently undercover, inside of a monastery. It was a beautiful and modern building. It even had internet, and offered facilities for both monks and nuns. Though that should have been an exciting new adventure for Bob Wellsap, quickly turned into a collection of boring activities, not to mention the simple fact that his preferred food items definitely weren't on the list, and for his mission to be successful, he would need to stay in check. So Bob was in a constant state of hunger and lust, in an attempt to suppress the voices in his head. The man stood in the monastery's kitchen, dragging his knife across fresh, bloody meat. It was the only activity giving him some solace, peace of mind. The therapeutic noise of sharp metal slicing through raw flesh was a good way to quiet the noises he had to deal with on a near-constant basis. Something exciting needed to happen soon, or else he would do it himself. But why were Bob and his master in this situation to begin with? The reason was an ancient book of incantations that supposedly was hidden beneath the monastery's library. Apparently, the building's founder discovered this human leather-bound book inside of a wooden cabin that had been trashed quite severely. The house was so cursed and unholy that the presence of pure darkness was nerve-wracking. And this book was what Bob's master needed. "Excuse me, Father Bob?" asked the feminine voice behind the large man. He turned around and he smiled from ear to ear. It was you, a mere nun, but Bob had taken a liking to you. Your body young, skin as soft as a warm blanket, and hair that sadly was covered by your habit most of the time smelled wonderful. Yes, you were one of those tender treats that Bob savored, and more often than not spared by accident, as he wanted to eat you last. And maybe, if he got lucky, got to eat you in a non-violent way as well. "Yes, dear sister?" he asked professionally, his eye twitching ever so slightly as he suppressed his urges. Upon your scent entering his nostrils. Are you cooking today?" The monastery had only a handful of nuns and monks living here, enough so that only 2 cooks were required to prepare meals. Thankfully, one of Bob's passions was cooking. "Yes." He pointed at the walk-in fridge, which had the schedules posted on it. "Why do you ask?" You tapped your fingers together. Well, you stuttered. "I'm your partner for today." Admittedly, you didn't check who your kitchen partner was today, so seeing him was a little bit of a surprise to you. "What are we making?" "Well..." Bob looked at his meat. Truthfully, he maybe had gotten a little overboard. It was cut into fine cubes already, so that really left only one choice.
Soup. Meat soup,
he said. You smiled gently. It's always meat with you, huh? He gulped loudly. You're lucky there aren't any vegetarians among us. He blinked. If there were, he would make personally sure they would not survive his stay at the monastery. His mission be damned. Still, though, a proper soup needed vegetables. So, as he brought out more meat from the fridge, you sat down on a nearby stool and began peeling potatoes. This would take a while, but this was hard work in the name of the Lord. So it made you smile regardless. It was an hour into your work when Bob suddenly gasped. You stood up. Something wrong, Father?
I cut myself,
he muttered. As he had been slicing meat, the voices had suddenly come back and they took him off guard. Now that he was wounded, however, a reluctant silence had quickly followed. Oh dear. He rushed to the first aid station near the kitchen's entrance. Bob, meanwhile, sighed as you arrived with a big red bag filled with bandages.
It's not that bad.
Thanks to his profession, he knew. But, Father, you hurt, you said as you rummaged through the bag for something to put on his wound.
Sister,
he muttered. You didn't listen.
Sister.
You looked up, concerned. And then something warm was pressing against your mouth. Your eyes widened. For a moment, you thought you had put something really naughty into your mouth. You blinked.
Go on. Lick it.
Your brows furrowed with concern as your tongue began to gently slide over the cut on the finger he was pressing against your lips. Like a dog, you began to carefully lap up the red liquid seeping from it. It tasted metallic and salty. It was gross, only made worse by his warm, twitching muscles. Yet, you couldn't stop. You felt both violated and aroused.
Good girl, said Bob. You're doing God's will.
You looked at him questioningly, but he just smiled.
Well, you are taking care of a poor, injured holy man.
You blinked. His smile widened further as he noticed your tongue had become more eager and active. You were blushing, eyes widened, while he relished in the power he was having over you in this moment. Though this strange scene didn't last forever, as the door to the kitchen was opened by another nun. Bob quickly pulled his finger from your lips, and you looked away in shame. The nun just wanted to know how long it would take until supper was ready. As your gaze averted from her, upon asking what was going on, Bob took over speaking for you.
I have a small cut. She's just helping me fix it.
Yes. Just a small cut. You're just helping him fix it. There was nothing else going on. Your heart raced, and sweat was rolling down your forehead. Impure thoughts waving inside your head. The next time you had an encounter with Father Bob Wellsap was after a sermon. He was sitting a few benches before you, as the new preacher had gone on a long tangent. Bob had fallen asleep, to which you seemed to be the only one noticing. Not wanting to embarrass the father in front of everyone, you patiently waited in a prayer position, until only you and Bob were left inside the prayer hall. Gulping, you rose from your seat. Hands folded in your lap, you walked towards him. Though, what you didn't know were his instincts, that despite his sleep were still active and on high alert. And as you touched his shoulder to wake him, quick and silent like a snake, his hands darted forward, forcefully grabbing you and pulling you in. Your body was so pressed tightly against him that it was hard to breathe. It's almost like he was trying to game-end you. He was cuddling you like a voluptuous stuffed animal, his head buried in your chest due to the awkward angle. You could feel his warm breath seeping through your robes. Your fingers twitched, face flushed, twisted into an awkward grimace. And your heart was pounding like the keys of an organ during a sermon. You should say something, do something, but you couldn't. Too tight was his grip, and all your pleasure receptors were telling you to keep going. You wanted to do impure things, things that were too sinful to even think of. And then his grip suddenly slipped. You fell off of him with a loud thud, as Father Bob awoke from his slumber. Confused, he looked at you on the ground, flustered and red. He tilted his head.
Sister, what happened? Why are you on the floor?
Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. You stuttered inside the confession booth. Like every Sunday, you entered the tiny compartment to seek guidance. Meanwhile, the tiny wall separated you from none other than Bob Wellsap. It was his first time in the confessional, but he felt like he had given great advice, at least until now.
Yes, my child.
With a muffled wood, you couldn't make out his voice, but he could tell it was you. His ears were too sharp thanks to his, occupation. He licked his lips delighted. If his master had found that stupid book by now, he would right now punch through the confessional's wall just so his fingers could wrap around your throat. Bob wanted to hear your surprised yelp as you attempted to save your life. And it's Father Bob. He blinked.
Wait, what?
He said. He had been too much thinking about, doing things to you, that he didn't listen. You paused, taken a big aback. You had been a little quiet, weren't you? You decided to repeat yourself. I said I was having impure thoughts about Father Bob. He blinked and then smiled from ear to ear.
And when do these thoughts come, dear sister?
Whenever he's around, or I'm alone in my room in the nunnery. He gulped. No way. I try to suppress it. I know it's a sin. I can't stop myself. I want him to enter my room at night and... Bob's right eye twitched. He was many things, but one of them was being a man. And hearing a beautiful young woman talk about this stuff was very entertaining. "And what are you doing with Father Bob?" he asked, trying to sound professional, or at least as professional as he could. I want him to tear off my nightgown, throw me on my bed, and treat me like an animal. Bob gulped as he went into even more detail of your surprisingly vivid and detailed fantasies. He was impressed how a pure nun such as yourself could have such fire inside of herself. And if he was honest, he'd admit that you'd arouse him. When it came time on how to atone for your sin of lust, he didn't have an immediate answer. He just sat there. Father?
You know, normally I'd suggest flagellation, but...
You huffed. Yeah, that would be counterintuitive.
Yeah.
He ended up punishing you by copying a few select verses of the Bible a couple of times. Meanwhile, however, Bob came up with a plan that would help both of your urges in a more direct manner. It was late. The moon was shining through your room's window. You were kneeling in front of your bed in prayer. The cool moonlight made you relaxed and calm. However, as you were praying, you didn't notice the red shadow quietly unlocking your room's door. The devil slowly crept into your room, his massive hands taking hold of your shoulders. You squeaked like a dog's chew toy, which was ironic in the grand scheme of things. Bob forced you to turn around. Looking out of him, you saw his red devil face, grinning from ear to ear. He was still wearing his priest gown, Bible attached on a chain hung from his belt. Face covered by a red devil mask that only revealed the lower half of his face. His mouth turned into a twisted grin. Scared, you were lifted onto your bed before he pushed you down into your pillow. Seems like your dreams will be fulfilled very soon. Hey, thank you for watching my video until the end. If you're new here, I hope you stick around and watch a few more. But before I say goodbye, I'd like to remind you to like the video and subscribe. That really helps the YouTube algorithm. That's all. Hope you have a good day. Until next time. Bye!